All right, everybody, let's go ahead and get started. Again, my name is Kevin Hancock, Director of Solutions here at Exostar. And first, let me apologize for having my camera off today. My bandwidth's not great where I'm at, so I'm trying to cut down on that as much as I can. So thanks for joining for why a dedicated standalone tenant is essential for secure external collaboration. Before I dive into the formal content, just a few housekeeping details. So today's webinar is scheduled to last 30 minutes. That does include Q&A. Now, you're going to be muted during today's presentation, but we did ask for questions prior to the webinar, and some folks did submit those, so I'll be covering those at the end of today's presentation. If for some reason we have an outage, we haven't had one yet, but just in case, go ahead and please refresh your screen and try to reconnect that way. That doesn't work, you can always try to use the same that same link you receive via email and come back into the session. If we don't get to your question today, you can speak with one of our Exostar managed Microsoft experts at any time. We've got a couple of different ways for you to do that. You can email us at managedmicrosoft365@exostar.com. Or you can come to our website, www.exostar.com. There's a chat feature there on every page, and we'd be more than happy to answer your questions that way as well. So let's dive into the presentation. So over 62% of organizations or procurement organizations say that they want to strengthen their relationship with their supply base. A number of folks want to do that via collaborating with them more closely. And in today's area, or within the aerospace and defense industry, trying to collaborate is often difficult. There are a lot of restrictions, a lot of things we need to make sure are in place before we can start to share information and start to work with our partners. Now, many of you today have your own Microsoft 365 Teams environments to work within your organization. And many of us by default say, well, Teams lets me share. So why don't I just go ahead and bring those partners into my tenant? But as many of you know, or your IT organization will quickly let you know, it's not, there's got to be a lot of controls in place. The tenant itself needs to be configured in particular ways to make sure that that's safe and that we don't overshare something that we're not supposed to. So what I'm going to talk about today is how you can do that in a secure and compliant manner with an Exostar solution, but also give you some ideas in general of how you might do that. So when we want to talk about collaboration, really with anybody, but this is going to be focused on the aerospace and defense industry. And every industry has its own compliance requirements. In aerospace and defense, this typically centers around controlled unclassified information. And we need compliance with NIST 800-171 and the emerging CMMC requirements around that. So we want that compliant, secure collaboration environment to be able to support those things. But at the same time, we want it to be easy to use. And as we all know, applications aren't always easy to use that are compliant. So we want to kind of break down those barriers and make a common user experience available for both our own internal users and those external users. Because if not, it's just not going to work out. So the industry has been addressing this issue for quite a while. The ND-ISAC, that's an industry organization around national defense, has a recommended architecture when you're working with Microsoft and how you want to address this. For many of us of a certain age, this is what we used to call an extranet, that physically separated, that air-gapped area where we're going to work with third parties. My own internal folks will have access, and I'll have a way to invite third parties into that. Microsoft now calls this in their kind of their Teams and M365 environment, a Meet Me tenant. This requires not only the establishment of that tenant, but you've also got to manage identities for those third parties that you're inviting. Now, Microsoft has Azure B2B connections, but in order to use those in GCC High, where you've typically got to establish this tenant, those third parties would also have to be in GCC High. You have to ensure that they are enforcing that multi-factor authentication, that they're requiring, kind of the same level of security that you have in your organization in order for them to work in that tenant. Your IT staff would have to configure that tenant, would have to set up that additional Active Directory or those Azure B2B connections. They would have to manage that trust relationship. And also, if somebody has a problem, they're going to have to support that partner as well in making those connections and coming into the system. Exostar is trying to lower that barrier of entry to do this at scale in a compliant manner and manage and support this as a SaaS service for the aerospace and defense industry. And to do that, we've developed a solution, our managed Microsoft 365 solution, to allow this to occur. This solution really combines three key ingredients. We've got that Teams environment up in Azure GCC High. We can connect this via a B2B connection with your own internal Active Directory if you've got a GCC High tenant on yourself and your partners. We've configured the tenant to support the CMMC requirements, the NIST 800-171 requirements, and we embed an application within that Teams environment to allow you to manage that tenant space, set up teams, invite users, restrict users, create custom roles and things like that within the tenant. So you can safely share information with your third parties. It's set up in a deny by default manner. You determine who gets access, but Exostar's tech ops and Exostar's support teams are managing that space. They're the ones who set it up, configured it, etc. We're working both with your identities in GCC High and using that as your B2B connection, but for either your organization or others that may not have that, we can also use Exostar's identity and access management platform as well, our managed access gateway. Many of you are using this today to connect to supply chain portals, to collaborate around your compliance requirements and things like that. You've already got the multi-factor authentication through Exostar, et cetera. So we can leverage that for both you and your partners as well. The architecture is as you see here. It is that Microsoft tenant up in GCC High, installed by, configured, and set up by Exostar. Exostar's tech ops and support teams are the SOC and NOC services around this tenant. So we're doing the monitoring, we're doing the reporting. We have a shared responsibility matrix that outlines the 85 of the 110 controls that we take on while you're there within the tenant. Individuals are going to access this tenant via a web browser typically. They're going to come into the tenant, do their work in the CUI, maintaining that CUI there in the environment. This Exostar application that's embedded within there, that's going to put guardrails around that team creation and user invitation process. It's setting up the tenant in that deny by default manner, that least privileged access. So you only get access to the tenant once you've been invited by the organization that is the Exostar customer. They have a role that's called a sponsor administrator, and this can be more than one individual. They're the ones who invite individual users in. There's also an affiliate role called a team manager role that can be set up within a team space. So individuals can manage that team space, including the invitation or the deletion of users from that team space. Users, once they get invited into a team, will only see those teams that they've been given explicit access to. So all of that is being managed by the Exostar application. It also enables particular functions or features that, again, are trying to ensure that CUI is maintained there in the tenant. There's a feature called compliant file drop that allows you to set up a mailbox within a team space. So those team members can email CUI directly into the tenant. They don't have to drag and drop things from their environment. If they're outside your organization, they can send that CUI directly in the tenant without coming into your corporate environment. You can send files externally to this if you want to, send CUI to people that you haven't invited into the tenant. It also allows you to block download in particular teams. So you can create a team space, block downloads within that, so people can't pull information from the tenant if you want them to maintain it within there. So again, we're just setting up those guardrails, trying to shrink that system boundary and ensure that we're enforcing those NIST 800-171 requirements there while folks are in the tenant. So let me show you how this actually works. So I've got the system here. So I'm logged in as Adam Spark. Adam Spark works for an Exostar customer called Glory Minerals. Glory Minerals and Adam Spark are managing this space for Glory Minerals, right? And Adam is that sponsor administrator. Because he's got that administration role, he's coming through this Exostar application, or he's not coming through, but he's doing functions via this Exostar application within the tenant to ensure we have those guardrails in place. One of those things, obviously, is he can create additional sponsor administrators, right? Adam doesn't want to be the only person. So he also designated Catalina as another sponsor admin. So the two of them can split the duties. He can look up a user at any time, including users that from other organizations that they work with. And Granger Systems is one of their partners, and see what teams she has access to. Is she a sponsor admin? Do I need to delete this user? Can also see to get individuals like Emma in and to link with other partners. We can also link, we add in their partner domains. So we give that, for example, at exostar.com. I can then invite users from Exostar, and they're going to come in. These users are coming in from Exostar's managed access gateway. This partner is coming in via an Azure B2B connection. When we work with you to set up this tenant, we'll ask you, do you have a trust relationship with anybody with an Azure GCC High that you want to give access to via that manner? They'll be put on a whitelist so you can create that partner domain when you're ready to. We can add additional licenses. We can delete and archive teams. If we delete a team, it's going to be in this holding pattern, if you will, in this deleted state for 30 days, and then it's going to be removed from the system. So this is a scrolling list, if you will. Archive teams can be restored from here or moved on to the deletion phase. This allows you to restore that team. It'll restore with data and structure, but you would then have to go add users back to the team. Now, though Exostar is managing and monitoring this tenant, we do give you access to the information about what's going on in your tenant at any given time. You can run reports both audit reports about what's gone on in this Exostar application. When did I add users? When did I delete a particular user? When did I add a team or delete a team? Things like that. You can also do an audit report around the things that go on in the files themselves. When was this file downloaded? Was this file changed? When was it changed? Was it deleted from the system, etc.? Those things can also be done on a team basis. You give the range you want that report from, etc. You can also, get information about users, teams, permissions, all those kinds of things as well. So again, we're giving you access into that reporting system, even though Exostar is managing and supporting and monitoring this tenant as part of its service as well. Now, the work itself in the tenant is done within the team spaces. So this is where the collaboration is done, and this is your typical Teams functionality. Now, if I want to create a new team and add users to it, I'm going to do that again via the Exostar application. I'm going to go into that Create Team tab. I'm going to give this a name. I'm going to choose how long this team goes for. And now I'm going to go ahead and create this Denver team. Now, right now, the only person who sees that this Denver team exists is Adam, right? He's the only member of that team, if you will. To invite users in, we're going to go to that user invitation tab, and we're going to choose a list of users. We could also do this singly. I'm going to select that team. I'm going to bring in this delimited list, and I'm going to look up these users. Now, these users are being looked at in those places, in those domains, right? Either Exostar, Azure B2B connection. That's where these users are being looked up. One of these domains, Yahoo, is not authorized. So if Adam wants to start adding people from Yahoo, he'd have to go back into the administration tab and add Yahoo in there. Now, they're not going to be authenticated through Yahoo. They're going to be authenticated through Exostar. These folks are already in the system. They're both from Adam's company, Glory Minerals, but there are other external parties as well. Now, if they're in his organization, he can invite them not only as a member of that team, but he can also invite them as a team manager. So Maya is going to be set up as the team manager for this Denver project, and then Maya can now add members, remove members, do all those functions there within the team space. She can manage the permissions around the team, all that kind of functionality. Now, some of these users, they're not yet been invited to this team's environment, and in fact, they don't even have Exostar accounts, and that's where their organizations are authenticated from. So these folks, they're going to be invited, but they're going to be directed first to set up their Exostar account. Once they get into their Exostar account, they'll see that they have access to Manage Microsoft 365. They'll come into it and they'll see that they have access to that Denver team space. Now, there isn't anything yet in that Denver team space, but what I had done is I have a team space in here. So the invitations were just sent out. I have a team space in here called CUI inbox, and I direct, and Glory Minerals directs people to send CUI there if they're not yet part of a team or they don't quite yet know where it goes. So we set up that CUI inbox team space. We used the Exostar application to enable that feature, compliant file drop, in this team space. And I used my Exostar account, Kevin.Hancock at exostar.com. Whoops, somebody disabled that while I was talking. Somebody else, not quite sure why that was. Oops, no wonder I'm in the wrong team. Sorry, that's CUI vendor. I wanted CUI inbox. My fault. There we go. So I sent information from Project Denver, from my kevin.hancock@exostar.com, and I attached a bunch of CUI files directly to that email. I can review that email here. I can then export those files and bring them into the tenant. When the files got into the system, that's when they were checked for viruses, malware, ransomware, etc. That's part of the team service. Anytime a file is uploaded or downloaded from the system, it goes through those checks and balances. Well, I guess there's no balancer, it's just those checks. And these files now come into the system. You're going to see there's a bunch of image files because this included my corporate signature block with a bunch of images about Twitter and things like that. I can remove these images via the interface. If you guys didn't know it, Teams itself is just an interface over SharePoint. And then I can choose these other files and move them into that Denver project team space that I just created. Now, I could have also chose to send these files externally. If I would have right-clicked on the file and chosen that Send Files Externally button, an email dialog would have come up and allowed me to send those files to an individual or to any email and do that. Or in this case, I'm moving these files from this particular CUI inbox team space into that Denver team space. They're not the Denver team space. If I go there, I don't think the files will have shown up yet, even though they disappeared from the SharePoint space, because it takes a little bit for a team actually to get created in this. So if I go to Denver and I go to general, you'll see the files aren't quite there yet, but we're going to work on the files directly here because, again, one of those other permissions I could have put on that team space under Manage Teams was I could have blocked download from this team space. And that's going to, not allow me to download files, but because I'm here in the browser, I can work on those files, here in the permissions. If I had turned off those, that block download, I couldn't work on them within the teams, or I could work with them in the team space, but I couldn't download them to my desktop. So I would just use the embedded applications, right? Word, PowerPoint, Excel, Visio, etc., to work on the files here. And I'm going to just jump into a Word doc real quick. I'm going to edit that file and do it all here within the browser. So again, we're just trying to shrink that boundary, ensure that the CUI stays here within this particular tenant. So hopefully that gave you a good overview of the application and what we do around securing CUI and how we do it compliantly. Now, Exostar has a number of other solutions, both in the compliance space, like our CMMC Ready suite, of which Managed Microsoft 365 is one of those. We do this around secure collaboration. Obviously, that's what you just saw. And then we also do a number of supply chain applications, both on the demand side and the supply side. If you'd like some more information about those, feel free to reach out. We'd be more than happy to have a conversation about those as well. Now, as I mentioned, I did get 3 questions prior to today's session. One of these came from a customer who's just getting set up. So hopefully, folks, welcome to the family. Glad you were able to join today, and I'll go ahead and answer your questions as well. That's number 3 there. But I'll answer number 1 first. So how many controls does one inherit from your enclave? So in our shared responsibility matrix, we provide 85 of those 110 controls. That shared responsibility matrix is available on our website, www.exostar.com. Go to products, look under Manage Microsoft 365. There'll be a link to that shared responsibility matrix there. Number 2, what are alternatives to GCC High for DFARS 7012 compliance? Now, for those of you not familiar, DFARS, Defense Federal Acquisition Regulation 7012, requires you to ensure that you secure controlled unclassified information in accordance with NIST 800-171. Now, there are 110 controls within NIST 800-171 across 110 control families. Now, GCC High helps address some of those controls. So part of this is what controls are you trying to get alternatives for? GCC High can monitor your desktop. It can, provide you secure collaboration spaces in Teams. It can secure email in Outlook, things like that. All within that, managed by you, set up by you. You can enforce multi-factor authentication. You can manage desktops, servers, all those kinds of things. So it does a portion of those controls. You would have to have other technologies for some other ones, because there are controls like training around CUI, training on the use of applications, monitoring. Now, Microsoft has a monitoring solution, but it's monitoring the stuff up in Azure. You may also be monitoring things in your own environment. So it's all about that. And there are certainly alternatives, right? AWS has a government cloud with many of these services. Most of the services around SIM and things like that also have FedRAMP moderate services and solutions available for you. So it really depends on what you're trying to comply with. So hopefully for number 3, as part of this demonstration, you saw who gets access. So who gets access really is determined by you, the customer. You decide who gets access, from both your environment, from you and your partners. You do define those gatekeepers. Those are the folks who have those sponsor administrator roles. I showed one way how you get CUI into the environment via that compliant file drop feature. You can send information in. You can also drag and drop information in, right? This is a Teams interface, so you can drag and drop it between it. Now, for CUI that needs to be controlled on a corporate network system, such as your ERP or QMS, that's really outside the Exostar scope. We're not providing compute within this enclave. We're managing the CUI that's in the enclave, once it's put there. We're gating access and putting those controls in place there in the enclave. But we're not doing those things around systems and information you may have on site. Those are things you'll have to think about in your compliance and your system security plan for those types of systems. So I want to thank everybody for your time and attention today. Hopefully that answered all your questions. If not, please reach out to us via email or come to our website. We'll be more than happy to answer questions that way as well. So thanks again for joining me today. Have a great rest of the day. Take care.